I'm going to keep it 1000% real with you guys. I have been checked out of Overwatch for a hot minute by this point. I've been vaguely aware of what's been going on, but like, I don't know, man. I've been burned too many times. I've been playing this game since day one of Overwatch 1 back in 2016. I have, on 2 separate occasions, become a content creator specifically because of Overwatch. I've said a million times in videos and on streams and shit that Overwatch is a game that is uniquely fascinating and frustrating to me in equal measure because it always has threatened to do something truly excellent and then just fallen short. Like, its lore, its characters, its world building, they've all felt like they were always on the brink of achieving something really incredible, but then, like, just tripped and fell halfway between third and home. There's even a video in the Members' Choice polls right now about how I think that the original sin of this game's narrative was the release of Sombra and the lore that accompanied her, which I do really still believe, and I do hope that topic gets picked so I can talk about it in light of all of this stuff, because as much as I love Sombra, she is undoubtedly where it all went off the rails. And maybe the most frustrating thing about Overwatch for me is the reality that it truly still has its claws in me. Disappointment after disappointment, letdown after letdown, and I still fucking fall for it when it promises that this time it really will achieve that greatness. But this time it'll be different. This time it's for real. I promise. It happened with the release of Overwatch 2. It happened with the PvE announcement. It's happened every time they've announced some big overhaul or some more lore or whatever else. But honestly, I thought I was kind of done with it. Last year, I think I played Overwatch like maybe 24 times, both on and off stream. I'd stopped reading the lore. I'd stopped keeping up with the new characters. It just didn't really interest me. But then, on February 4th, 2026, I was forced to confront the unfortunate reality that this game truly still has me by the fucking balls.
Vendetta is reclaiming what is rightfully hers. Doomfist is defeated. And 2026 is officially the reign of Talon. Welcome to the Overwatch Spotlight.
For people who are out of the loop, Overwatch 2 is no more. It is now just Overwatch once again, dropping the 2 from the title and overhauling a lot in terms of game systems, story, and more. 5 new characters, Mizuki, Emre, Domina, Anran, and the quirky millennial abomination that is Jetpack Cat, will be joining the game this week, with the promise of 1 more per season for each of the other 5 2026 seasons. There's a rank reset with the game going back to Season 1, and accompanying the seasons will be a year-long story arc that was kicked off with a big new cinematic featuring Vendetta taking over Talon from Doomfist. Vendetta, for those not keeping track at home, was the final hero release for Overwatch 2, and is the daughter of Antonio Bartolotti, the man you killed at the beginning of the Retribution PvE mission if you can remember all that way back. Not only that, but she seemingly kills Doomfist in a way that mirrors the death of her own father. Kind of. Cutting off his titular gauntlet, which did not happen to Antonio, before kicking him through a window, which did happen to Antonio, to what is presumed to be a watery grave. The fact they're not declaring him dead makes it feel pretty likely that he'll eventually make a comeback, and he isn't really dead, because, like, they keep saying disappeared and not killed, but whatever, you know, it's still pretty dramatic. And what's crazy is, like, this has kind of been being built up for a while. Overwatch's socials, client, and communications have all been taken over by Talon for probably a month or 2 by this point, and it really did feel like they were trying to build up to something with Vendetta. I mean, but also, speaking for myself at least, I couldn't bring myself to care anymore. I had gotten hyped for Overwatch 2. I'd gotten hyped for PvE. I'd gotten hyped so many times throughout this game's lifespan over the last decade, and it felt like every single time I was just being let down. And at this point, I sort of just assumed it was yet another thing where they weren't really going to have anything to show for it. Turns out they did. I was in a group Discord call watching the showcase with friends, and like, I don't know, goddamn, this stupid fucking game still has its hooks in me. Like, Overwatch is a game that just refuses to die, looming large over its genre and fans and even medium in a way that belies the fact that it is maybe the most notorious example of wasted potential we've seen in this medium. But for today, I just want to talk about how I can't stop caring about this game. Not in like a, wow, it's so amazing, I knew it'd always pull through kind of way, because frankly, I'm still not sure that they can pull it off. This is not my first go around, and I have seen many promises broken before. Instead, I kind of want to just talk about why, after all that I've seen and witnessed and gone through with Overwatch, I just still can't shake this stupid fucking game's grip. And why I think Overwatch just refuses to die. Part 1. Overwatch's beginnings. Overwatch came about at a really unique time. It was a huge new IP from Blizzard back when that sort of thing was an incredibly exciting prospect. where when it's done was their response when they were asked about a release date, and before the they're just a small indie company jokes or the articles about rampant workplace abuse were a thing. It had this pretty distinctive art style that immediately caught people's attention, and as has been discussed repeatedly on this channel before, it truly is a masterclass in character design. The diversity of its roster feels like such a given in 2026 because that's become so normal, but in 2016, it was genuinely pretty groundbreaking for a big studio to put such an emphasis on diversity, and even though it was followed by a lot of other titles in the genre that oftentimes exceeded what Overwatch had done, it really can't be oversold how much it stood out at the time for people. And what's more, there was some real story-ass story going on back in the day. We used to get pretty frequent cinematics really showing us what these characters were like. And truly, if you weren't there for it, I cannot express to you what the vibe was like back in the build-up to the release, as well as in the first year or so afterwards. Like, we had the cinematic trailer, we had Recall, we had Alive, we had Dragons, we had Hero, and then fucking Infiltration. Like, back when the Sombra ARG was happening, people were desperately looking for clues because of how eager they were, to the extent that they kept going on these wild goose chases and had to be dragged back in by Blizzard. They thought Ana's strike skin was Sombra, they thought there was some secret song hidden in the sky of Dorado, and they interpreted literally any bug or error or oddity in the game or any Blizzard communications as some sort of a hint towards who she was. It was this months-long process, culminating in Sombra hacking her way into BlizzCon and everyone just going fucking wild because at that point in time, a new Overwatch hero was something that came with some real hype.
This was supposed to be the most advanced security system on the planet.
Like, it was so exciting. I can't even really begin to communicate that if you weren't there, though, because, like, I mean, 5 new heroes just got announced, and I don't even think that really matches up to that level of hype. It was just a whole different world back then, I guess. I don't know. And sure, there were definitely flaws. Like, the first season of Overwatch Competitive was notoriously stupid, coming down to a coin toss for some unknowable reason with some truly atrocious balancing combining with a lack of role queue to make a torturous experience. Back at launch, we had 3 healers, Mercy, Zenyatta, and Lucio. There not only wasn't role queue, there weren't even hero limits. You used to be able to get stuck with like multiple Widowmakers and 0 supports. We were in the fucking trenches. Loot boxes didn't have a non-duplicate system in place that tried to guarantee that you'd always get a new item of a given rarity if you didn't already own everything of that rarity. And you used to not be able to get event cosmetics with Overwatch coins. You had to get them from the loot boxes. As well, the lore of early Overwatch was a mess, with timelines and lore events not really making much sense and things getting dragged back and forth all over the place. I mean, again, go vote for that How Sombra Ruined Overwatch's Story video to learn more about what happened there. And while there were always rumors of a Netflix show that would have predated stuff like Arcane or Edge Runners as video games and Netflix series adaptations, and just kind of all the projects related to it kept falling apart. But like, goddamn if it wasn't excellent. It was a genuine cultural phenomenon. Maybe the biggest one gaming had in the 2010s in terms of breaking through to the mainstream. And for myself, as embarrassing as it is to kind of admit in hindsight, I low-key actually had initially been on the Battleborn train. We all make mistakes. But basically the second I watched the cinematics, I knew I was in the fucking tank for Overwatch. I loved it right away, but also, I actually moved to Australia not long after it came out, and the school that I worked for down there was providing my housing, and they didn't let me play online. I had to go out and buy a Telstra portable hotspot to play it, and then I had to drive to the local Macca's in my 1996 Holden Barina 2-door hatchback with non-functional air conditioning if I wanted to download a patch because that mobile hotspot did not have enough data for it. But like, goddamn, I was invested. Like, I got horrendous mono during my gap year down there, and so I ended up spending months bedridden and unable to do anything. Like, I was in and out of the hospital. It was bad. I'd just sit there and get way too invested in the Sombra ARG. Like, I was in the Discord servers. I was there when we found the Sky Code. I was there looking up hexadecimal codes related to the Eichenwald map that had just been released. Like, that shit was so serious for me. And when she debuted, my internet actually broke the second she hacked in with the beginning of the infiltration cinematic, so like, very immersive for me. And like, I could have punched a fucking hole in the wall with how hyped I was. This character instantly became my main, in part because I guess I was trauma bonded by disease. And back in the day, that genuinely meant something because people fucking hated her. Like, being a Sombra main today is nothing. It's just another character you play. But back then, oh, you were making a choice. And like I was good at her too. Like I climbed to Masters as a Sombra borderline one trick because even though a solid like 30% of people would throw if you so much as picked her, I was winning everything else with her because I was good. I am rarely the type to flex that I'm actually good at a game, but I was. I actually became a content creator because way back in the day, there was a thread on the Overwatch subreddit that was like, comment a character you wish you knew how to play, and someone who mains them will tell you how to play them. And I wrote out this huge guide to playing Sombra that actually ran into the character limit, which I didn't even know Reddit had for comments, but whatever. That got a lot of very positive responses. Even got, I think, a couple Reddit golds or whatever. I don't fucking know. It's been so long. But a bunch of the comments were telling me to go make it into a video because like it had a lot of good information. So I did. That video was an actual guide to playing Sombra, released sometime in the beginning of 2017 after I came back to Canada during my gap year. Got like 30 views and nobody cared. Then I went to university, and midway through Frost Week, while I was shit-faced, going between bar to bar, doing beer shots for an hour or whatever the fuck it was, it was a mess. I was a disaster. Regardless, midway through all of this, it popped off, and from there I became an Overwatch content creator. Made more guide videos for Sombra, I streamed, I even had a face cam once upon a time. I actually still have some friends from back then, and believe it or not, there are still people who watch my current videos who remember those old ones. Eventually I burnt out because of some real life stuff that was going on, but like, Overwatch was really important to me in those early days. I had my friends because of it, I had a community because of it, and so I stuck by this game even as it started to feel a bit more sour, and even as I gave up on being Viveros for a while. And that's kind of the next point. Part 2. The Forgotten Years. Overwatch launched with a bang, but it struggled to keep up that momentum. Sure, it had its moments, and sure, it still had lots of good characters coming out, but shit was no longer quite as rosy. We experienced the Moth meta, one of the worst times to ever play this fucking game. Anyone who says that the worst time was in Overwatch 2 is wrong and a liar, because it was Moth meta. It was atrocious. We were not getting nearly as many cinematics anymore, and the story kept stalling out. We got Brigitte, the only hero who I think you could genuinely claim actually straight up ruined the game in any meaningful capacity when she was released. Like, again, people who started playing this game recently, or especially with Overwatch 2, do not understand how truly abysmal the metas sometimes got back then. But what's more, it started to be accompanied by more and more negativity in general. Blizzard went through one of the most disastrous PR periods for any company in the gaming space, with abuse allegations and shoddy work and lazy cash grabs and snide comments at their fans who complained about shit like the Diablo mobile game. And the industry at large was being perceived in an increasingly cynical way as well. Again, for people who are in their early 20s, it might shock you to learn that people used to genuinely be ride or fucking die for companies like Blizzard, or CD Projekt Red, or Bethesda. Like back in the day, the "is it a bug or a feature? Yes" joke about Bethesda games was meant pretty sincerely as like part of the charm. The love and adoration for CDPR was so excessive that fluffing The Witcher 3 was basically the gamer's national pastime. Blizzard used to be known for quality, for attention to detail, and for the kinds of polish that you would expect from like, you know, an Apple or a Disney, the kind of companies where that sort of thing was always a priority, where it was about getting it right more than just getting it out to market, at least initially. Now, were all of these really true? Like, not really. Bethesda was known for popularizing the scummiest microtransaction bullshit known with horse armor and setting the path for what we're currently dealing with. CDPR was well known to be engaging in crunch. Blizzard was becoming increasingly monopolistic with the acquisitions and mergers with companies like Activision and King. But, you know, in the common cultural consciousness, these things were largely glazed over. Being a critic of this stuff was either perceived as contrarianism at best or downright heresy at worst. It's also not to say that the culture was positive towards everyone or for everyone. Famously, Gamergate happened in the mid-2010s, and it was very much so not a positive or, frankly, intelligent thing. Part of what allows for this sort of nostalgic image of this era of gaming to persist is that we don't tend to really talk about how much more insanely hostile gaming spaces were to women, queer people, people of color, and basically any other minority or marginalized group. Again, younger members of this audience might be aware of stuff like the tits or GTFO comments, or the get back in the kitchen and make me a sandwich comments, or even just the liberal use of homophobic, racist, and misogynistic slurs in lobbies on Xbox Live. But I think that a lot of people who weren't there for it might kind of think that it wasn't really that bad, like that it's a bit overstated. But like, it wasn't. It really was like that, and it was severe. I have a pretty noticeable gay voice, and I basically always avoided voice chats because I would be called a slur. Like, it hasn't happened to me in a long time in online gaming, and certainly not to the same kind of frequency that it used to, but back in the day, Part of why I didn't stream with voice chat on for a long time was because it would turn my VODs unusable, because I would get called a bunch of fucking slurs that I couldn't use. Women would do the same sort of thing because they'd immediately be insulted, demeaned, and told to either play support, if not just outright quit. It's not like it's all woke and progressive today by any means either, especially not with the current cultural conservative backlash, but trust me when I say it is night and day compared to that period. The reason I bring it up is because while that nostalgia for the past is real and the perception of the industry and these studios and their games was definitely shaped by the dominant cultural voices rather than the negative experience of the marginalized, it is still worth noting that we tend to retcon a lot of that history when it suits our needs. Gaming spaces were negative before and during this point for a lot of people, but for the presumed target audience of gaming at the time of cishet white guys between like 14 and 30 who got to set the tone, that era was largely still a fairly positive, optimistic one. And since they get to set the tone for everyone else, it kind of shapes how everyone else sees it too. But like I said, that changed, and it changed pretty quickly. The mid-2010s was kind of the last point in history where everyone still believed that notion that history ended when the Berlin Wall fell. Shit got very real politically, socially, and culturally, and economically, and everything else for people from the late 2010s into the 2020s in a way that made everyone genuinely just not very charitable and very pessimistic in the process. Overwatch was unique in a lot of ways because of the kind of audience its diverse roster cultivated, but even with that, people started to realize the ways they were getting burned and exploited. Companies like EA took loot boxes way too far with Star Wars Battlefront 2, and it started to turn into resentment towards the mechanic in other games as well. More and more big, hyped up releases were just these abysmal flops, like No Man's Sky, Fallout 76, Cyberpunk 2077, and more. Like, that sort of shit didn't actually used to happen that often with the big hyped up games. And it started to turn people on the studios they used to run this vicious, uncritical defense for. For Overwatch though, the big thing was the workplace abuse scandals. Blizzard as a company did some truly fucking awful shit. And for a game that had prided itself on its diversity and inclusiveness and built an audience off the back of that, it really did sour everyone on them. And then on top of that, the game stopped being updated as much. Then they stopped major updates altogether while they said they were working on Overwatch 2. For years, Overwatch was going through a content drought. No new heroes, maps, or even really lore or anything else. And what we did get was at a much reduced rate than before. The Overwatch League was falling off harder and harder. The esports scene in general was pretty heavily diminished. And in the era of COVID, it really was not a good time for Overwatch. People left it for other games that were seemingly more committed to being better than what Overwatch was, whether in terms of monetization or community care or whatever else. But Overwatch never truly died. It has, by this point in time, survived countless Overwatch killers. Even today, when it likely has the most competition that it has ever had between Deadlock and Marvel rivals, it still survives. And there are a few reasons why it made it through that dark era. Part of it was that the lore was genuinely still really intriguing and people couldn't help but want to see where it went next. Another part of it was that it had become such an ingrained part of so many people's gaming diets that they could never truly give it up, especially if their friend group kind of revolved around playing it together. However, the biggest part was absolutely the heroes. Come hell or high water, people cannot give up on Overwatch's characters. They're just kind of too good. Part of the biggest issue with the content drought was that we stopped getting them. That's really when a lot of people like myself felt like they ended up giving up on the game for good. But then, after years of waiting, Overwatch 2 was finally on the horizon. This was not, as it turned out, necessarily amazing news. Part 3, a masterclass in mismanagement. So, this part of the story is probably the part you're most likely to be familiar with if you're a newer player. Overwatch 2 comes out and recaptures a lot of the magic of the first game, but still with that bitter aftertaste from years of neglect and an increasingly cynical general public. People had hoped that Overwatch 2 would bring them back to the golden age of this game, and it just never ended up doing that. Never had a hope of doing that. It couldn't compete with nostalgia even if it had gotten everything right, and it most definitely did not get everything right. And at the time, people wanted to like Overwatch again. They wanted to go back to what this game once was, and what it was for them specifically. So they went looking for excuses for why it wasn't what they wanted. They pointed to hero reworks, they pointed to balance changes, they pointed to the new push mode, they pointed to the 3 new heroes, they pointed to the new maps, they pointed to the removal of the old 2CP mode, they pointed to the move from 6v6 to 5v5, they pointed to this and that and everything fucking else to try and come up with a reason for why this game wasn't scratching the itch they so desperately wanted it to and felt like it should be. And I won't pretend I'm immune to that. My first few videos on this channel were me bitching about how people were talking about a Sombra rework. and the failure to expand this game's universe, and the shitty monetization, and how Blizzard doesn't understand survivorship bias when it comes to balancing a game, and on and on and on. I wanted this game to be what it once was for me too. At the time, I was an unemployed student stuck in my hometown once again, struggling to get anything to work out the same way it kind of felt like I was when I first started making content. I came back to making videos because of this game's release, and I felt like I always had something to say about Overwatch because of what I said at the top. That it always feels like Overwatch was threatening to become something truly great, and that what made it so fascinating was exploring how and why it kept failing to achieve that. And like at its core, Overwatch still was and still is fun. People keep playing it, and you cannot say the same thing for every other game that's as old as it is. Hell, with the emergence of Marvel Rivals, you've seen a lot of people, including myself, with a new appreciation for how good of a job Overwatch does with visual clarity, sound design, silhouettes, and more. Games like Deadlock are a lot of fun too, but they're also way harder to get a grasp on for a new casual player, and they expect you to know a lot more about the genre than Overwatch does to just be basic levels of functional in it. And while a lot of the Overwatch 2 heroes were weaker characters than their predecessors, in part hampered by this game's refusal to tell a fucking story, there were still some really solid gems. But it kept threatening to get good and then failing to follow through. There were a lot of moments of that, but the announcement and then subsequent cancellation of PvE was, I think, like the really big one for most people. I know for me, that was a moment where I thought, like, okay, this game is just going to keep letting me down and it has no intention of changing that. And then I started to actively try and move on to other stuff, both for my own entertainment as well as just for my content. I used to be pretty much exclusively an Overwatch content creator, but I really don't talk about it much anymore, in large part because I kind of just didn't want to let it have that control over me, that hold over me. I didn't really know if my audience would want more of it either, and I wanted to explore a more diverse range of subjects, but I don't know, I felt like I was just too disappointed by it to keep making it so central to my identity. Hell, even this new model was in part inspired by wanting to diversify a bit from my original outfit, which was so heavily inspired by Sombra. I wanted to not be tied to this so heavily. I mean, same goes for my little intro stinger animation thing for my videos. In the past, it used to be a Sombra one that someone on Reddit had made for me back when I was in my first round of being a content creator. And now it's this because I kind of got tired of how people kept treating me about Overwatch content. And for a few years, it really has felt like Overwatch had lost its juice. New maps, new modes, new characters, they just didn't have the sauce they once did. In large part because they just kept introducing random people with no connection to anything, so nothing ever advanced. But then we come to this last week or so when I fell for it again. Part 4. Drop the 2. It's Overwatch again. We're at another one of those inflection points for this game right now. On February 4th, the new roadmap was released, and once again they're making some really big promises. The story will finally be advancing. And the first big story beat in years came with Vendetta's hostile takeover of Talon and the presumed, but not really, death of Doomfist in the process. They have seemingly finally internalized that their Omnic narrative fucking sucked, and they aren't going to keep trying to push this Omnics versus humanity narrative with its really shitty analogies and parallels to real-world issues. We're going back to what Overwatch initially was. Overwatch coming back together to take down Talon, the biggest threat to global stability the world had seen since the Omnic crisis. It is a full overhaul, symbolized by dropping the 2 out of the title. It's back to basics, back to the core of what Overwatch is. It's not the sequel, it's not a follow-up, it is Overwatch. And frankly, in a lot of ways, it's better. People forget how genuinely badly Michael Chu, Jeff Kaplan, and Bobby Kotick fucked over this game on every level. Truly, the blame falls on them for their respective roles in whiffing one of the biggest slam dunks in the medium's modern history. And the new team is legitimately doing the most to try and not just return Overwatch to what it once was, but what it always felt like it was supposed to be. We are getting a genuinely insane number of heroes in 2026, with the first 5 coming out on February 10th and then 1 more every season for the rest of the year. 10 in total is more than any other year, by a lot. And while I truly despise that we've allowed the epic Reddit bacon Terry Crews as Doomfist Chungus millennial fuckers to get the win with Jetpack Cat, a stupid gimmick of a concept that I've hated with my heart and soul ever since they first teased it with Brigitte, and have lived in fear since they ever introduced Wrecking Ball as an actual character. It still feels like we're truly moving in a good direction. Overwatch has never put out this many characters all at once, or even in a full year, and it's being accompanied by some promises about lore and narrative and more that feels serious. But it has felt serious before too. I've been down this road before. This fruit looks familiar. And I know in my heart of hearts that I shouldn't believe them, that I should be more skeptical. Hell, we've seen something kind of similar happen when Doomfist himself was released. Everyone thought that him taking back the Throne of Talon would mean these big lore things were finally coming. And by and large, they just didn't. But I can't help myself. This game will not fucking die for me. The part of me that wants to see Overwatch become what it always had the potential to be still burns bright, and even my hater ass can see that this has the makings to finally deliver on it. No other game that fucks up as frequently and spectacularly as Overwatch has and disappoints its players as much as Overwatch has gotten to reach its 10th birthday as a live service game like this. And there is precedent for this sort of thing finally working out for a game. I have said for years now that Overwatch needed to take a page out of League of Legends' book and just do a reset, and while this isn't a hard reset, it is definitely a soft one. Null Sector is functionally out of the picture for now. We're back to Overwatch vs. Talon with a straightforward motivation. Vendetta wants what's owed to her but was stolen by Overwatch and then the people from Blackwatch who took over when they killed her father. And Overwatch wants to put a stop to Talon's terrorism. Like, perfect. I can't wait. If they do it right, I think this shit can finally work out. But maybe it won't. Maybe the part of me that immediately had me hitting up artists asking how fast they could draw my model in Mizuki's outfit, shout out Rain, absolutely goated by the way, will be let down once again. Maybe I'm just gullible. After all, 5 heroes at once will inevitably fuck up the meta at least for a little bit, even if I do think 4 of the 5 of them have some absolutely top tier designs and look really interesting. The new maps and lore and everything else have me hyped, but there is also literally a whole section of the menu, at least the old menu, that was dedicated to their inability to follow through on their last attempt to do this. There is every possibility that, once again, I'll be left disappointed. In fact, all evidence points to that outcome. And I'm aware of that. I just can't bring myself to not be excited at the same time. Overwatch is seemingly incapable of fucking up badly enough that people aren't going to still hope that it pulls through. It is a testament to how much it gets right that people will still forgive the things it gets wrong, and in particular to the character designers who've built one of the most endearing and enduring casts in the medium's history. Like, seriously, think about other games and franchises with a roster this big. Outside of shit like Marvel Rivals, which gets to cheat by building off a century of character development, you don't tend to get this sort of thing, and you certainly don't tend to get the kind of roster that people love this much. Overwatch still, after all of these years and all of these fuck-ups and all of these PR disasters, still holds a special place in people's hearts in spite of their own best judgment. So maybe it's wrong to say that Overwatch refuses to die. Rather, I think Mercy got it right from the jump. It's heroes who never die. And as long as the heroes persist in the hearts and minds of fans, then those fans will keep the game alive as well. Inevitably, Blizzard will still let us down again. They did have those massive layoffs that are going to make it hard to keep up with this pace, and the industry is moving in some directions with AI that I really just hope Overwatch doesn't follow. And it sounds like Aaron Keller won't based on what he's said so far, but like, I don't know. I'm okay if this game never dies. I'm glad that it's still here, in spite of it and myself. The fact that it's about to turn 10 years old in May, the same month I'm turning 28, Jesus Christ, and is still able to captivate so many people makes me feel like it, I don't know, like it might just be able to turn it around. I sure hope so anyways.
Magnify.
Thanks for watching. This was a bit of a spontaneous one on account of watching the Overwatch Spotlight that I immediately went and put together because good lord do I have some strong feelings about this, but I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and consider becoming a channel member as well. Channel members pay $5 or more a month on YouTube or Patreon to support the channel, and in return get shoutouts at the end of the video as well as the opportunity to vote for one video topic per month. And there are still a couple days left to vote in the February poll before it ends on midnight, February 10th. The topics are Oblivion, Skyrim, and how limitations can make games better. This video would argue that Oblivion's relatively more restrictive gameplay and mechanics actually allow the player to make more choices and explore more freedom than Skyrim's open-ended approach to skills, combat, and progression. Why social skills actually matter in competitions. This video would explore how social skills work as both offensive and defensive weapons in competitive environments, and why that's important. What does it mean to win? This video would be about exploring what winning actually means, not just in terms of how it affects us, but how we define win conditions and how hard it can be to get it right. How Sombra ruined Overwatch's story. This video would be about how my favorite character in Overwatch and least favorite character in Inescapable is basically single-handedly responsible for Overwatch's narrative getting completely derailed all the way back in 2016, and why it's taken nearly a decade for them to maybe be able to get it together again. Like I said, this poll ends on February 10th at midnight Mountain Time, so if you want to vote, be sure to go to the links in the description to become a member and cast your ballot. The next videos are also all still on schedule, so be sure to keep an eye out for next week's video. A long game isn't inherently a good game. Lastly, thank you very much to all my channel members. At the $25 Elite membership tier, thank you to Adele, Robot Juice, and Bingo Banga. At the $10 Premium membership tier, thank you to Tortoise, Anja Tenar, Cavi Corbin, Corey Anders, NJD, and Mooney. At the $5 channel membership tier, thank you to Cage the Orc, Fish Toast, Alex Stone, Destiny, Cadence, Marshalis, Gavos, Crimson Cyclo, CatLover192, Corey, MV, The Only Enigma, Mariah, Meep Cube, Noisy Pitta, Harv, Marcy Gaskell, Deku _, Safon, Lala the Bambi, Teo Tamara, Alinea, Caffeine Jelly, Ismi, Aiden S, 1000 Dumplings, Nilos, Lily Hero, Mitzi Core, Bubble Boy, and Shy J. Whether you're a channel member, a subscriber, or just somebody who decided to click on this video out of curiosity, thank you very much for watching, and I hope I'll see you around again soon.